One of the great lessons of the new marketplace is abundantly clear. Collaboration has never mattered more. Across the healthcare landscape, the businesses with the greatest impact are succeeding through new partnerships, connections, and approaches to creating value. So what does this mean for life sciences? What happens today when your product enters the market and you realize the ground has shifted beneath your feet? Suddenly, you're on the outside looking in, from the familiar territory of life sciences into the free-for-all jumble of healthcare. So, where do you go from here? In short, deeper into the new healthcare ecosystem. The ecosystem is the collaborative confluence of provider organizations, health plans, patients, and the healthcare professionals who are today's influencers and decision makers. It's complex, with a growing array of digitally connected and human touchpoints that shape decisions differently than your trusted network of physicians alone. The ecosystem is where you'll partner and grow. It's where every touchpoint becomes an opportunity and everyone in your organization a new value creator. It's the reason we are here at Impact Summit 2021. Welcome to a multiplayer world ZS can help you master, so you can amplify your value, seize fast-emerging opportunities, discover a new roadmap to success, and make the leap from a supplier of goods to a partner, collaborator, and value creator.
We are thrilled to welcome ZS CEO Pratap Khedkar to the stage.
Welcome everyone to the Impact Summit. We've just come through one of the biggest disruptions in healthcare, the biggest in a century perhaps. It was uncomfortable for us. It was challenging. It is probably still challenging in many ways. And it brought changes to how healthcare was delivered, how it was consumed. But it also created the opportunity to do things differently and do them better. One theme that I'm going to explore today is health disparity, health inequity in many of our communities, whether they're communities of color or communities that have low income or communities that are underserved in some other way. Some of these large cracks in our system have made it very clear that healthcare as a system is not showing up in an equal, equitable way for everyone. Now, this inequity starts well before we step into the doctor's office. Starts in our communities, starts in our homes, in our workplaces. We have access to a stable food source. How much do you earn? What educational background do you have? How many people are you perhaps providing care to in your household? The shocking reality is that your zip code is the biggest predictor of your health, a bigger one than your genetic code. Now that fact screams against every instinct that we have that health should be all about biology. And working to achieve that health equity, I think is something we can all agree on. I think it's a laudable goal. But there have been pockets of innovation on that front as this topic has become more and more important. Now, healthcare entities are actually working to solve these problems. But one of the things that is very, very obvious to everyone is no one can solve it on their own. So they need to partner. They need to collaborate. But the second aspect is that we will need multiple types of players, right? It's not a bilateral issue. It's a multilateral issue. You need the provider organizations, you need the payers, you need the community advocates, and you may perhaps need increasingly big tech and some other stakeholders as well. Let me give you an example of a partnership that's happening. My neck of the woods, actually, in New Jersey. So BCBS of New Jersey Horizon, one of the biggest health plans in the state, teamed up with the Barnabas Robert Wood Johnson Health System, which is one of the bigger systems in the north of the state. And they came together. They recognized the need to work together, but then they focused on a specific problem. They identified about 1,000 people commercially insured. Okay. So health insurance and access to care was not so much of an issue, But these 1,000 people were really in 4 zip codes in Newark. And what they discovered in order to improve the care that they got, that they needed to a variety of things. Education, wellness, preventive screenings, family care physicians, and all these other aspects of needing help with telehealth, needing help with scheduling the appointment. Now, if you do all these things, what the pilot showed was quite amazing. There was a 25% reduction in the total cost of care. In addition to that, there was a 60% increase in the utilization of behavioral health services. Now, behavioral health is one of these topics that is quite underpenetrated in the healthcare system today, but it's something that actually impacts all other comorbidities, all other treatments you get, and how effective they are. So the way that the problem gets defined then expands to include all that is important, all that is bearing on that, your personal behavior, your zip code, and the other things you inherit, the social determinants of health, not just the medical care you get. So what does this example tell us? It says that health plans and provider organizations, that addition coming together, is equaling patient outcomes, better treatment. But why am I talking about that particular relationship to an audience that's primarily life sciences? Because we think life sciences can play a role. They can enter that equation and contribute in a meaningful way. After all, if life sciences are about biological innovation, remember the fact about the zip code and the genetic code? I think we have to address collectively, all of us, all of you, a way to enter that equation in a way that we can make that genetic code, the biological innovation matter more. But that won't happen till we address all these other inequities that are showing up in the personal background or the zip code. Now, the question is, how can pharma or life sciences enter? Can they? The good news is the door of opportunity is open. 2/3 of IDN executives that we have surveyed say that they're willing to partner with pharma, and that willingness has gone up as a result of the events the last year and a half. But of course, the door is open. Now what? The challenge that I want to put to all of you is, how should you as life sciences companies enter this equation to create the most value? Now, some of you already are. For instance, one company among you is collaborating with a multidisciplinary team to focus on breast cancer for women of color. Black women with breast cancer are about 40% more likely to die than their white counterparts. They're also more likely to be diagnosed at a later stage with more aggressive disease. Another pharma company is focused on HIV/AIDS. The needs of the people, the communities where this particular disease is rife, very similar to COVID-19 in some ways. It disproportionately affects the vulnerable, the marginalized groups. And of course, racial and ethnic minorities are a part of that. Poverty is a part of that. And so this pharma company is working with the communities to make sure that they can participate in that equation in the manner that I talked about. So these are just some examples of how we can collectively pool our resources to create that impact. But there's a lot of room to go. There's a lot of untapped potential to improve. So what is the right way forward? How should we think about entering this equation, creating more value? So there are 3 ways that we think that pharma and life sciences can prepare for this. You need to change your mindset. You need to focus on the right metric. And you need to spend a lot of energy coming up with the right method, the how. Let's start with the mindset. I think the approach that we are trying to talk about is what I will call business to ecosystem. What does that mean? 40 years ago, pharma started with what was basically a selling model of business to doctor, B to D. But 20 years ago, one thing that got added to it was business to consumer, B2C, when there was patient DTC and all that started up. And now I think, of course, we are quite good at those two. In the last 10 years or so, as payers and organized providers have become important, that has become B2B, business to business. And of course, you need all of them. It's not a matter of one or the other. But from B to D, B to C, B to B, Now, I think one of the challenges coming up ahead for the next decade is B2E, business to ecosystem. The ecosystem is made up of all these disparate players. It's changing very rapidly. So there are new players, especially from the tech side, entering, disruptors. Conventional players are also remaking the way they work and what they are and how they've integrated. And so I think life sciences has to catch up to this change and also keep in mind how these stakeholders are interacting with each other, not just bilaterally with pharma, but multilaterally with each other. Because I think entering their equation around the patient is more valuable than trying to create a bilateral relationship only. So it's a little bit of a shift in mindset that I think is going to be very key. We need to be there. The second piece is the metric. As more players enter this ecosystem and try to collaborate 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time, it is really important to row in the same direction. What are we aligning on? What is that central objective? Now, people talk about patient centricity, patient focus. Of course, the patient is the objective. But what specifically about the patient, and how are you going to think about it? One person, population, subpopulation, community? All those things will come into the picture, especially when you're talking about something like health equity. Back to that example from Newark, 1,000 people in 4 zip codes. What is it that we are trying to improve? Is it the total cost of care? Is it the experience? Are these the long-range outcomes? Are these some very short-term healthcare metrics in the community that we are tracking year to year that we want to change? So having that common currency, having that aligned metric is going to be extremely important. The third is the method, the how. And I think this is where some of the biggest challenges are. We asked pharma companies, we said, you all agree that you need to create value in this ecosystem and with all these partnerships. Are you good at doing that? Are you good at creating value propositions, advanced value solutions? And you know what they said? 100%. Every single one of them said, no, we are not good at that. So this building the ability to create value is a challenge. One reason for this challenge, there are some external ones like, regulatory and compliance, conservatism and things like that. But there is an internal reason too. In order to provide this value, you don't just collaborate across the ecosystem, you collaborate internally across your own silos. And that is also a very big barrier. In fact, we asked them, we said, how many of your companies are able to do that cross-functional cooperation in order to bring one of these value propositions to the ecosystem stakeholders? And they said 88% of them said it's not working well. 88%. And so breaking down these internal silos is going to be a key piece of this method, the how. Now, the other aspect of the how is in terms of how you are going to affect the problem. Is it one patient at a time? Is it a micropopulation, a subpopulation at a time? What kind of segment are you interested in? Is it going to be locally focused, which is where a lot of the recent innovation has actually happened? Because remember the part about the zip code, it's the communities, it's the zip codes, it's the adjacencies, it's the social aspects that are driving a lot of these determinants of health. And so fixing them will require that sense of locality, that sense of sub-segmentation. So you're not just worrying about one patient at a time, you're worrying about a small population, subpopulation at a time. And that is very much in line with where health plans are coming from, provider systems are coming from. And so that's the other aspect of the focus, is to work on a method that actually aligns with the metrics of these other stakeholders with the appropriate mindset. Pulling that all together, I think, will be key for pharma to enter that equation to add value. So I just talked about the healthcare ecosystem and how it's transforming and how everyone needs to have the B2E mindset in order to solve the problems therein. How is ZS pivoting? At ZS, we believe it is our mission to transform healthcare by leading in certain areas. What are 3 things that we are investing in heavily, even as we speak, in order to face this oncoming decade and succeed in that mission to transform healthcare, working side by side with many of you? The first is to build on the legacy of analytics and digital to create an exchange, a platform mindset, so that multiple stakeholders can actually cooperate on data and analytics. The second is to make sure that we can leverage the digital transformation not just inside companies, but outside companies in a patient-facing way, that we address this difference between the patient and the population. And the third is that by getting these two to work together, we can actually finally bridge across the silos that I talked about, the different stakeholders. So let's start with the bridging. One key aspect of bridging the divides of the silos in the healthcare ecosystem for ZS is to be able to work directly with all these stakeholders. So, of course, we continue to work with life sciences, but it is increasingly critical for us to also work with health plans, health providers, and some of the digital disruptors that are coming into the system. And we are beginning to do that. And it is our mission to expand that work so we can become a transformer of healthcare through the connections that we can establish between the various parties. Second, we talked about the metric. And sometimes there's a trade-off between thinking about a population and thinking about a patient. There does not need to be one. Digital transformation, digital approaches, looking externally can absolutely help us bridge that. That's why digital and connected health around the patient is a big internal startup investment for us. And as part of that, we have recently acquired a company called Medulan, whose track record, whose mission, whose abilities align very well with that. So I'm thrilled to welcome them into the fold as well. Third, the mindset, the mentality of a platform. Part of creating that connection, it's like a watering hole. You need different stakeholders to come together. They may not be perfectly aligned, but they have a shared need and they are collaborating in service of that need. And that need here is the outcome of the patient, the outcome, the health outcome of that community, the disappearance of that health inequity. Now, building that platform using the legacy of work that we've done over the last 20 years, so that first we can transform commercial, then clinical development, then the rest of the healthcare ecosystem is also a mission we are on, and you'll hear more about that today. So these three things, the bridging, connecting the players, the digital platforms, connecting the stakeholder to the patient in a very customized way. And the third piece, which is the platform, which connects that society or that community of stakeholders in a very effective data and analytics sharing way. That theme of connectivity is what we are all about. And we are going to lead that transformation in healthcare through that connectivity, through that interconnectedness, through that leveraging of data and digital and analytics in the decades to come. And it is our hope that we can work with you side by side to transform healthcare together. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratap. Again, hello and welcome to our global audience. We're so happy to have you with us today. It's now time for one of our keynote sessions featuring Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Please navigate to the theater by clicking on Theater in the top navigation. And then from there, please click on the keynote session. Once you're in, tell us in the group chat where you're joining us from today, and be sure to give Dr. Gupta a warm welcome.